people don't understand what this war really for. It was really uncalled for, unprovoked. So you don't see any visible signs, but the discontent is growing, and I see that this war has made Putin's regime more fragile rather than more strong.
Tell us about Alexei Navalny's condition and state of mind right now.
To put it into context, yesterday was a 2-year anniversary of Navalny's assassination with Novichok poison in Russia. And his story has been really epic. He was almost killed, and then he miraculously recovered. He talked to one of his assassins over the phone as part of an investigation of how he was poisoned. Despite all the threats, he returned to Russia in January 2021, and he was thrown in jail by a crazy tyrant, Vladimir Putin. And even from jail, he raises his voice against tyranny and against this brutal war that Russia has unleashed in Ukraine. Due to his uncompromising stand, even in prison, he gets reprimanded by the authorities, and he spent about a week in solitary confinement over the last 10 days. He's out now, but it's a really tough place, Russian prison.
I can only imagine that it is. Is he managing to keep his spirits up, and how does he manage to sort of sustain himself, given everything that's happened to him the last 2 years?
Uh, well, I think it's part of his character. We keep communication with him. A lawyer is allowed to visit him for about an hour on weekdays. So he writes his hand-written notes to us. He reads whatever materials we send to them. So that's the trickle of communication that we have. And judging his by his messages, judging by the stuff that he puts on the internet through Twitter, through this channel, you can say that he is in good spirits, and he even applies his civil skills in prison, trying to launch a trade union for prisoners in Russian prison, in the harsh conditions of Russian prison.
What do you know about his state of health? I mean, to survive that kind of poisoning attempt must take a huge toll on you, and as must spending so much time in a Russian prison colony.
Um, it was more difficult in the beginning. In the spring and summer of last year, he even went on a hunger strike, demanding the right medical attention, as he had problems with his nervous system, with his leg, etc. Since then, his health has improved, and he is quite thin, but he has the fervor in his actions and in his words.
I wanted to ask you for your assessment about the state of the opposition to Putin and his allies in Russia right now. You'll have heard, I'm sure, as we have this morning, about the assassination, apparently by car bomb, of Daria Dugina, the daughter of one of Putin's closest allies. Can you give us any insight into what this might mean, or what we should read into what's happened?
When the war started, there was a wave of protests in Russia against the war in many cities. Tens of thousands of people took to the streets. About 15,000 people were arrested. Since then, it has become very dangerous for people to raise their voice against the war, not only for public protests, but for things that people post on social media. People get fines, people get arrested for spreading so-called fake news about the atrocities of Russian forces. So there is there's little overt protest against the war, but we see many signs of discontent. The recruitment, there have been dozens of cases when recruitment centers for Russian army have been burned. And yesterday, indeed, there was an assassination of probably made on one of the ideologues of this aggression, of this whole Russian revanchism, Alexander Dugin. He was unharmed, but his daughter, who was traveling in the car where he was supposed to be in, was killed in this assassination.
So that's obviously an indication that the opposite, that there is, serious opposition out there. Is there any prospect of that doing anything more decisive? Is there any way that Putin could be toppled from within, do you think?
Even though it's difficult to it's dangerous for people in Russia to raise their voice against the war, people are not happy. The business and political elite have seen their lifestyles turned upside down, their fortunes decimated. The average person have seen rampant inflation. They've seen deterioration of standards of living. Familiar Western brands, McDonald's, IKEA, Nestle, all leaving the country. And people don't understand what this war really for. It was really uncalled for, unprovoked. So you don't see any visible signs, but the discontent is growing. And I see that this war has made Putin's regime more fragile rather than more strong.
And I just wanted to ask you about your own circumstances. You were granted political asylum by the UK some years ago. Do you people like yourself who are willing to criticize Putin and speak out in support of Navalny, do you feel safe, given we know how Putin and his henchmen can act and have acted against people around the world?
I have no doubt that Russian security services can perform their special operations and assassinations in any part of the world. And we've seen, unfortunately, a number of these cases in the UK, Mr. Litvinenko, Ms. Skripal's assassination, where a British citizen was killed. But I'm probably one of the potential targets for them. But you cannot really live your life when you constantly think about this threat. So I take reasonable precautions, but I carry on with my life.
Vladimir, good to speak to you. It's Carol Walker here. Obviously, we have got these pretty tough Western sanctions against Russia. But when we look at what is going on in Ukraine, of course, but also the kind of repression of any opposition that you've been talking about, do you think that there is more that the British government could be doing to try to increase the pressure on President Putin, or to somehow help those who would like him to be removed?
I think it's a naive view that any sanctions would put an immediate stop to the war and to the oppression of Putin's regime. They are more a medium-term to long-term measure to weaken Russia, to make sure that it won't be able to carry on the military operation with the same strength. I think the decisive factor that the Western countries as a whole, and the UK included, can do in these circumstances is, of course, provide more weapons to Ukraine, because Ukrainian army is highly motivated, and they have the sufficient number of people, of personnel, but the weapons, it's just a trickle of weapons that's coming from the West. And we see that the advanced weapons that are provided to Ukraine, like these HIMARS rockets, are really making a difference on the battlefield, and they throw the Russian forces back. So I think that's the decisive factor.